Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Security Repo podcast. I'm thrilled to be here live and in person with Nipun Gupta, which is it's awesome that you've come over here from the UK to Amsterdam, specifically to record this episode.
It's my pleasure, and Amsterdam is a lovely city. I've been walking around the canals on the way over, so it's amazing.
Yes, yeah. Well, you've got the full winter dreariness here, so but you'll be used to that. So you're the current COO of Bearer. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and then also the company Bearer?
Absolutely. So Bearer started as a developer-focused code security company, and I joined them earlier this year. I've been in security for about 15 years. I started in application security, then I went through innovation strategy, partnerships, and product management, eventually to be here as COO. Look, we're really excited to change the value proposition and make it really easy for both developers and security engineering teams to produce, ship trustworthy products.
It's really interesting just to hone in on one thing that you've said there, trustworthy products. Trust is something that's been a little bit disrupted in terms of the landscape at the moment, particularly in kind of source code, because I mean this year in particular has been heavily disrupted by AI, as you know, and products like Copilot, which we're just talking about, but also ChatGPT and their capabilities. How is kind of generative AI affecting the trustworthiness of source code at the moment?
That's a great question, and I think it's something that has become top of mind for every technical person or any technology company out there. Every product roadmap is being pushed to generate better customer experiences using AI. Every engineer has almost an obligation to try out the likes of Copilot to get more productivity, to get more efficiency. And I think for the most part, it has lived up to its promise of being able to help and support in creation of a better, more efficient engineering organization, and at the same time also for customers to get better experiences.
Do you think that when we ask these, let's call them code assistants, to kind of help us, how much can we trust them? Can we trust that they're going to, from a security point of view, can we trust that the solutions that they provide are going to be accurate?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting part about this question is anytime you ask somebody to recommend you something, generally the recommendations given are very, high level. You don't get to very specific. Look, I've been in consulting for a long time. We try to kind of manage risk using that tactic, right? Interestingly, in case of, stuff like Copilot or generative AI, it's trying to bypass that barrier and giving you exactly the answer that you're looking for, which comes with its own set of problems, right? Yeah. Problem number one is, of course, something that has been talked about a lot is hallucination, right? Are you sure that what you asked for is being responded to, exactly correctly? Because what generative AI is trained to do is to give you an answer that looks and sounds really good, right? But is it actually factually what you were hoping to get? That is a big question mark. The other and the more relevant topic for us here is AI-generated code, specifically code, is only as secure as like the underlying training model that it has been trained on. Interestingly, most of the source code out there is riddled with software security issues. Yeah. And look, for GPT 3.5, it's been pre-2021 training, and I mean, look, even 2023. We are not at a point where we can say most of the code we generate or we write ourselves as humans is secure. So guess what? If humans can't write secure code, AI cannot either, because they have been trained using the same ideas, the same code bases. So that's like the biggest challenge with taking AI-generated code and assuming that it's secure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of, like Yeah, I feel like people often make this distinction between like being book smart and being, like creative or being street smart, all these different areas. And, AI, I guess, in this scenario is very book smart, but we can't rely on the fact that the books are any good, like to start with, right. And it can't be creative. So, it's just regurgitating the answers and that. But I want to challenge this a little bit because when I've presented this kind of argument that it's looking at a lot of it's open source code. I mean, a lot of it, ChatGPT comes from the Common Crawl database. That's when it comes to code, 90% of that's GitHub, open source repositories. Like pick a random repository at random, you're going to find some nice security
glaring security issues. Yeah.
So this is it. But this isn't entirely new because before AI, we were copying a lot of code. For instance, from Stack Overflow, right? And I'm going to be the first to admit this. I think when I was first creating code, you need to do a specific function. You find a solution on Stack Overflow. It's way bigger than what you need, but it works, so just don't touch it. Is there much of a difference in terms of security from where we are now with AI and where we were 2 years ago even with things like Stack Overflow when we're copying it and we have a problem, we find a solution, we copy the code, we paste it in.
So the bigger question is there any practical difference in taking code generated by humans that are not core to the mission of the application, the company, the project, the product, however you define the boundary of this, or AI, right? Humans versus AI, assistance in code generation is always going to have a similar level of questionability because they are not incentivized by the same incentives that you are trying to achieve. And for you, the goal is to always make sure the business logic is sound, the functionality is there, and of course, security of your software is paramount if you're in a sensitive, application development environment. Your customers drive some of that. Your industry drives some of that. You yourself are proud of generating secure code, writing secure code. So I think like all of these interesting issues ultimately go back to this point. Does it make a difference copying it from Stack Overflow or getting Copilot to generate it? So far, there is no evidence that it would, right? In fact, like you are likely to trust Copilot more because of the machine-related foundations there.
Yeah. And then I guess the one other thing that things like Stack Overflow has is if someone does a shitty answer, you're going to have comments, you're going to have context around that. Whereas with AI, I guess you just kind of get spat out an answer.
That's right. And I think like there is no confidence level associated with that answer as well, right? How accurate it is, how secure it is. So I think like with anything coming out of machines, we have to be skeptical, right? And especially something like code, like some foundational model that was trained on code that is already out there, be it Stack Overflow, be it GitHub, right? You'll have to consider that it was trained on techniques that we know for sure are not secure. So what is it going to be? It's probably a hybrid product that was generated by humans and machines together. And something like that will probably have similar issues that it used to before.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess it's also around how much, like you talked a lot in your answers about the context and the business goals and what you're trying to do. And I guess like a good way to think of that is if you're trying to generate a random number and you ask Copilot or you ask Stack Overflow, what's some code to generate a random number? And it might spit back some code, but there's a big difference between securely generating random numbers that can't be related back to patterns and unsecurely doing that. But unless you really specify that and what you're looking for, or the systems understand the context of what you're trying to do, then it's just going to give you an insecure way, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong.
That's right. No, I think that's a really good distinction. Copilot may know right from wrong at the most basic level, right? But it may not know what's the most hardened equivalent of that answer. from a security perspective. And I think it really depends on your risk tolerance, your functionality, your business logic, your context as to if that is acceptable for you or not, right? And I think that's where you need context, and you don't get it from the machines, right? So you need ultimately either an engineer to spend that time manually reviewing that code, or you could automate that, right? It's up to you. But really, security of any code coming out of that Copilot or any code generation product, AI code generation product, is equally questionable.
Yeah. You co-authored an article recently about generative AI and productivity with developers. So I want to hone in on this productivity element now just for a minute. So you've mentioned a couple that Copilot kind of knows right from wrong at the basic level, and it kind of can help in some basic functionality. So we could probably assume from that a junior developer, maybe mid-level developer, might get some productivity boosts from being able to do this by asking its questions, and maybe seniors get some boost from the juniors not asking them. But as a senior developer, as someone that's been around for a while, someone with perhaps even your expertise in the field, would you get a productivity boost from using Copilot? Is this helpful to you, or do you think that this could actually do the opposite because you're now almost having to review someone else's code every time you want to do something?
It's a good question. And I think for the most basic use cases, like tier 1 stuff, that it's not something that I can spend my time on, and I would farm it out to an outsourced shop, or I would ask some junior developers to help me achieve that outcome. Copilot is exactly the product that I would use, right? Okay. So in a way, I can actually completely replace the need for a junior analyst or junior developer for these use cases, and I can go and use Copilot to do that, right? That I'm not worried about in terms of outcomes. So for example, write a regex for me to find something specific in this outcome of the code base or the user input or something like that. That's easy, right? Mm-hmm. But for you to say, make sure that it's a SQL query, but at the same time, this statement of the code is also parameterized and protected from SQL injection. There's something that it's not 100% confidence that I have in any AI code generation tool.
Can we put something in place between generated code and you seeing it, or you using it, or a developer using it, to actually make sure that that code's secure? What are some of the tools or systems or checks that we can put in place between generating AI that enables us to get that productivity, but reduces that security limitation that we have?
So I think it's important to understand how security teams want to govern something like this, right? What I would definitely advise against is creating a Copilot solution directly contributing to production pipeline, right?
That seems like a bad idea.
Sounds like a bad idea, walks like a bad idea, terrible idea. So if you're not doing that, then at the end of the day, whoever is using Copilot to get that productivity boost is the accountable party, making sure that it's secure. What that means is, if Copilot is not directly contributing to production pipeline, that means that code is under that developer's purview. The developer commits code. At the time of committing code, their pull request, if you're in GitHub, merge request, if you're in GitLab, is scanned by a automated secure code review tool. And then that feedback is provided to you right there with the right level of context for you to take action on. And be it human generated, be it machine generated, the code is code, and you are accountable for making sure its quality is good, your security is good, and that's the right place to enable that security review. I think before, it's just not enough information and context to make that decision easy. You're likely to ignore that or suppress that alert a lot. But at this time, you are ready to commit to a production pipeline, and the pipeline can give you the right level of feedback.
Got it. And so in that pipeline, we're like tools like SAST or SAST. We had a whole conversation about what to call it before.
CISO or CISO.
Yeah. Or CISO. So I've been saying it wrong this whole time. So SAST, we'll call it, SAST. That's a tool that has been used for, it's not new, right? This is a security tool that's been used for a while that basically checks code for security vulnerabilities. So this is the obvious tool to kind of implement in what we're talking about in this stage to check it. But one of the objections that I think everyone has with SAST is the amount of false positives that SAST has traditionally generated. When you plug that into your pipeline, and even like earlier levels of SCA to a degree, when you plug this in, you get like hundreds of criticals that are irrelevant, clogs up your pipeline, reduces you. Can we use that on generative AIs, or is this now just kind of offloading a problem that was the developer's responsibility that we're talking about to ensure the code's good, and we're giving it to security, offloading it now? Is SAST a good solution to implement here?
It's a fair question, and I think this is something that has turned off a lot of application security enthusiasts, security teams from SAST. It's been probably 20, maybe even more years that commercial SAST offerings were available in the market to buy, but they were meant for a security use case. They were never meant for a developer use case. So the assumption was that you are a security team who really is concerned about protecting your software security, and you are the ones who are responsible, and you are the ones who will take a look. And this was also meant for a waterfall paradigm. So it was never taken into consideration for the longest time in the history of SAST, static application security testing, that you want this to be a developer tool. For the most part, that's the reason that it's riddled with false positives, because guess what security people don't like? Missing out on things. So you would rather take the minimum risk-averse approach and try to cover as much as possible at the risk of giving you too much information to act on, be it correct or not. Now, also the reason that there are so many false positives is because we are talking about a probabilistic technology and not a deterministic technology. We are looking at static code. We don't have too much more context. All we have is what you have written in code, really, right? And based on that, we have to understand what are the anti-patterns, what are the relationships between different functions and attributes and sources and sinks, call flow graph, data flow graph, and accordingly make a decision if this is a taint, if this is a security risk or not. And it's not like there's a CVE for something we find in a static code analysis outcome, right? What we find is something that probably is really good at this point is OWASP top 10, CWE top 25, something that is attributed to a known set of bug classes or issues.
Yeah. Got it. And really, what I loved what you said there is that SaaS isn't designed for developers, but now kind of developers are being plugged into the security sphere with things like DevSecOps coming into it. And I guess that makes so much sense, is that now we're dealing with different people, but we're giving them old tools with someone else's priorities attached to them and expecting them to kind of work within that. Because security people hate missing out on data, on information. Developers hate being interrupted. Like that's got to be the equivalent, because usually their parameters or their success is based on productivity, output, code written, things like that. So really interesting. How can we solve that then? Like I know you're doing it. Bera is interesting because you're creating essentially SAST that's a development focus. Can you talk more about what are the differences that you have started to implement around that?
Yeah. But first, I think it's important to understand, besides us going from waterfall to agile method of development, what else has changed in the world that we need something for developers now, rather than continue to do the same old thing and let security users go and report a list of things for security for developers to fix, right?
Yeah.
That was the process. And when I was a security consultant, that's what I exactly used to do. Yeah, what would be different between me and a tool would be actually taking a look at every single issue, triaging it, adding more context from a threat model of the organization and telling them, okay, these are really high priority issues for you to fix, right?
Yeah.
But what else has changed? I think in 2020, 2021, every organization was forced to become a digital company, right? And I think that created a lot more code and applications than we ever anticipated that needed to be secured, right? And with the advent of generative AI and the rocket adoption that we have seen, it's gone even further. And in fact, I was recently reading some report on this. There's 1 million paid users of GitHub Copilot, over 37,000 organizations that are paying for it.
Yeah.
So if you're starting to pay for it, you are using it, right? For sure, there's other people who are trying it, but these are definitely known paid users. So at this point, we are increasing the complexity and the volume of your code base by a lot. Now, typical AppSec to engineering team ratio in organizations is 1:100, best case.
Yeah. Yes.
Or
yes.
worse.
Yeah. I think that's kind of a goal.
Yeah.
One AppSec engineer per 100 developers. That's like a goal. Yeah.
So guess what is the point of contention if you give a tool that is meant for security teams to now developers, because security teams certainly cannot handle the reports coming out of these tools with that amount of code, right? When it was, a certain lines of code, applications that I knew about, developers and teams I understood, they used to sit in the same office. I knew a lot more about what's happening in my organization, but that has changed a lot. I don't really know, especially if it's a large and complex organization. Yeah. I am really relying on developers to now help me secure the code directly without me ever getting in the middle of this process, unless I have to, right? Yeah. Unless the complexity of that fix is so high that they cannot understand it, right? So what we have done so far, we have tried to kind of put a Band-Aid on this problem, right? The legacy tooling around this would always be like, oh, you know what? Now we have a GitHub integration. We can integrate, right? Because you can integrate, so suddenly you're a developer-focused product too.
Yeah.
But that does it mean that it gives developers what it wants? Because what developers, as you said, they are not security experts, right? So they want something that they can understand and that also is in the exact middle of their workflow, so that they don't have to, fix something after it has been shipped, or they have moved on to another module, they've moved on to another story, another epic, right? You don't want to be interrupted about something that you did last month and now fix it because it's a security priority, right? But at the same time, also, you don't want to wait for a test to finish, for hours before you can make, something committed to the production pipeline.
Which is so many SaaS tools take so long to run, right?
That's right.
Clog up the pipeline.
Right. So you have to keep all these developer-friendly features in mind if you're trying to build another SaaS product, another SaaS company today, because ultimately the users are not security teams anymore. They are 80 to 90% of the user is actually the developer. So most of the companies who are buying SaaS products today, they are not confident enough to give that SaaS product to their developer to use and put it in the middle of their development workflow because of all the reasons we just talked about. The speed, the complexity of the reporting, the false positives, also the inflexibility. I don't know why this specific finding has been reported to me. I don't know exactly how the product is working for me to understand this better. So that means you need to understand the rule, But the rule set for most of the SAST products out there is actually closed source. So you don't understand what's happening here. So just putting a product in the middle of developer pipeline isn't going to fix it. You want to fix all these other problems as well. And that means actually creating a new product.
That focuses on the developer's workflow. That's not just plugged into their workflow. It actually tells them the information that they want, translates it into an interesting way, and does it. Very, very, very interesting. And if people want to learn more about Bearer, like what's the best, I guess the website that...
It's definitely bearer.com, or you can also go and try out Bearer at github.com/bearer/bearer.
And this is what I love too, is that it's open source, and I think not that long ago it would have been almost crazy to have an open source security company. Like for the business, like it wasn't that happened. I think HashiCorp was one that really led the way in kind of some open source development for security. But it makes so much sense for developers because that's what they're used to, right? A security person isn't used to going into a GitHub package and looking at it and understanding the code, but that's what a developer is, and having it on GitHub, helps with that. I think it's really interesting.
No, exactly. I think for anybody who is a developer, GitHub is their day-to-day Facebook.
Yeah.
Right? Their Instagram, their Facebook, they want to spend a lot of time there. So any time you talk about releasing a new product, it has to be de facto GitHub.
Yeah.
And if it's going to be an internal choice, especially when you're trying to do something new, it's very important to keep that developer user in mind and make it easy for them to access, try it out, break it, do really whatever you want with the product, right? And then that builds trust in the developer's mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end of the episode, and I always like to play a game at the end called Best and Worst. So I want to ask you, what is the best security advice that you've been given, or that someone has given you, and what is the worst security advice that you've heard? Starting with the best.
The best is don't sweat the small stuff, right? Don't worry about, okay, I have the low finding here, or, I have to fix it before I can call it secure.
Yeah.
Do what's most practical and high impact for the organization. And that's really what I focus on. And that's the best advice that was given to me by my consulting partner once.
And the worst. What's the worst security advice that you've ever heard?
Worst one is for CISOs to go to their board and talk in security jargon. I think that is the best way to lose credibility and not make any friends at the top of the company.
Yeah. We've had some great episodes from some CISOs that were talking about, or CISOs or CISOs, however you want to say it, that were talking about how to get buy-in from the board. And they talked a lot about that too, that, like you come in here and you don't align with the priorities of the board, you don't translate it into language that they understand, you don't translate it into how to actually get that across. And so I think you've nailed it with your advice. That's really good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nipun, for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you making the time to be able to do it. I know you have a busy schedule whilst you're here in Amsterdam, but I hope you have some time to have a look around. And thank you again. We hope to have you on the show again.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.